Good afternoon and welcome to the spring meeting for the Bacteria Implementation Group. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. I look forward to working with you as we move through today's agenda. I encourage you, if you have time, to provide comments as well as ask questions. On that note, I do want to extend this presentation over to Andrea Tantillo, who is my colleague here at H-GAC, to run through how to provide questions and comments.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Steve and I also just gave you permission to share your screen. I apologize for not doing that ahead of time. So we're going to go over a couple of housekeeping items first. First of all, this meeting is being recorded and microphones will be muted throughout the presentations. If you are on the phone and you are unmuted, please mute your phone. We will have 5-minute question and answer periods for our presenters after each agenda section. Please type your question in the question box on your control panel. You can also type your questions there if you are having technical difficulties or you have a question for H-GAC staff. We will use the raise your hand function and the question box during voting. We will also use the raise your hand function during the roundtable at the end to help us know when to unmute participants. Now, with that out of the way, I'll return control back over to Stephen.
Great, thank you, Andrea. So today, just to run through the agenda of what we're going to cover, we'll have a call to order introduction section. We'll look at making sure we are certified quorum for a couple items that we would seek approval of the BIG for. So we will look at the BIG roster and potential changes to the roster. Then we will look at summary minutes from the October 29th BIG meeting. There will be a period of public comment. So for those that are guests, feel free to, if you have a question or comment that you'd like to direct towards the BIG, there's an opportunity for you to provide those questions or comments. We're going to try to keep those comments down to about 3 minutes each. We have 4 items on our agenda today to cover. Those include an update to the I-Plan revision, an update to the 2020 annual report, an update by the TMDL program, the Total Maximum Daily Load program of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, as well as 3 presenters from H-GAC's water programs who are currently working on projects within the big project area. For those to orient you to the map on the right-hand side, the green area is the big project area. So when I talk about the big project area, note that's an area that covers most of Harris County and Montgomery County, including adjacent counties, at least a portion of those adjacent counties. Then item 5 is other business. As Andrea mentioned, we will do sort of a roundtable discussion at that point. We can follow up on any questions that didn't get a chance to get answered under the regular portion of the agenda. With that, I will move to the call to order and introduction section. To carry out this portion, since we are not live and present with members in a room, I will walk through those members that are signed into or registered to this meeting today. With that, I have Linda Pachek. I don't know if she was able to attend. Andrea, do you have any notice on that?
I don't see her in the attendance list.
Okay, Jim Robertson, if you'll wave your hand or note in. He's here? Okay. Tom Douglas.
He's here.
Sarah Bernhardt.
She is here.
Scott Tuma.
Not here.
Michael Thornhill.
Here.
Mac Martin,
Here.
Denise Ehrlich,
Here.
Christine Cooper,
Here.
Jerry Karavitas,
Not here. Oh, no, here he is, sorry.
Rachel Powers,
Here.
Linda Sheed,
Here.
Ralph Calvino,
Here.
Carol Labreche,
Here.
Karen Kotke,
Here.
Richard Chapin,
Not here.
Jack Murphy,
Here.
Patrick Reitmeyer,
Here. Oh, not here. Unless Destataki is here.
is Desta Taki here?
Yes. Is she an alternate for?
She's an alternate, yes.
Okay.
Brian Shemesky
Here.
and Danielle Cioci.
Here.
With that, I do count that we do have a quorum. All right, thank you all for your patience as we walk through that. As I mentioned, we do have a quorum, so we will move on to the review and approval of the big roster. We do have some roster updates. For big membership, Charlotte Cisneros from the Galveston Bay Foundation is replacing Sarah Gossett Robinson. Additionally, Michael Lee is moving from being an alternate to replacing David Brown as the member for the U.S. Geological Survey. Are there any additions to the big membership? We will be tackling alternates next. I don't see any questions or comments.
Mr. Snoza had his hand up.
Okay.
I think that might have been to make sure we saw that he was present, but he may have also had another question.
If you'd open up his mic.
Sure.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to make sure that I was counted as alternate present for Catherine Elliott, Urban County.
Okay, Robert, I do have you marked then. And just to let you know, I will get a list at the end of the meeting of those that were present. And so I would mark her as present with you as the alternate for her. Thank you.
Stephen Scott Jones also has his hand up.
Okay.
Hi, yes, I just wanted to let you know I was here, and Charlotte couldn't make it today, but you're correct. She wants to be the GF rep.
Okay, I will note that you are essentially as alternate for Sarah Gossett, you would represent prior to us bringing on Charlotte as the member. Thank you, Scott. Any additions? All right, how we will proceed with the roster updates and approving this panel and in approving other motions before the big, I would like to ask if a member wants to put a motion to approve these two changes to the big membership to wave your hand.
The first one I saw was Tom Douglas.
Okay. And if there is a second?
Brian Schmamsky.
All right, hold on one second. Okay, if there are any discussion on this, please place that in the question. Do we have any?
There are no comments and no hands raised.
Okay, we will then proceed with approving of the motion. To do so, I would ask that if there's any who would like to not approve the motion to accept these two changes, to wave your hand first.
We don't have any hands raised.
Okay, with that and the assumption then that the motion would carry, I will proceed with the acceptance of these two changes. Thank you. We will now move on to alternates. We do have a number of changes to alternates. I appreciate members seeking to secure alternates for their membership should they be absent on the day of a big meeting. With that, Sarah Bernhardt has put forward Tina Peterson and Paul Nelson to represent her as first and second alternates. Ted Driscoll has been put forward by the Galveston Bay Foundation as the alternate for Charlotte Cisneros. Kristen Schlemmer has been put forward by Rachel Powers to be her alternate. Jerry Karavitas has put forward Nugent Cotton and Elaine Savage to be his alternates, first and second. Michael Lee has added John Ellis as a second alternate for the U.S. Geological Survey. And finally, Linda Sheed has put forward Carl Masterson to be her alternate. Are there any additions or changes to this list?
Stephen, I don't see any hands raised and there are no comments in the question box.
All right, at this time, I will accept a motion to accept or approve these updates.
Carol LaBreche.
Okay, is there a second?
Tom Douglas.
And is there any discussion? Again, do that via questions, please.
Stephen, Scott Jones has his hand up. I'm going to unmute him in case he has a question.
Sure.
Hi, sorry, I didn't, I'm trying to find my way. There's real quick. Just to let you know, we wanted to actually have Nick Ellis and myself as alternates for Charlotte at GBF, and I'm sorry if that was miscommunicated.
So Scott, just for clarity, not Ted Driscoll.
Correct.
Hey, can you say the name again?
Yes, Nick Ellis, Nickellis, and myself.
Right, and you're already a member as an alternate, so we don't have to vote on that position.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I will ask again for approval of this list with the notice that we are removing Ted Driscoll and putting in Nick Ellis for an alternate for the Galveston Bay Foundation.
You were looking for another motion?
Correct. I would like us to see us go ahead and redo the motions.
Ralph Calvino,
Okay. And do we have a second?
Mitchell Powers,
All right. Do we have any additional comments or discussion? Anything, Andrea?
we had questions, but it's not questions that need to be addressed or technical support questions. So I think we are okay.
All right. As we did with the previous panel, I would ask if there are any motions to not approve this motion to approve this list.
There are no raised hands in objection.
All right, not hearing any objection, I will assume that the BIG will approve this list and we will move forward. Thank you. Up next is a review and approval of the summary minutes. I should have mentioned at the beginning, there are handouts. If you see the link on the right-hand side of your screen, it should say Big Spring Meeting Packet. If you'll click on that, in that packet, you will see the summary minutes for the October 29th fall meeting of the BIG. I will ask you to take a few minutes to review that. As you are reviewing, I will take edits at this time. Please place those in the comments or question box, please. Andrea, do we have any edits or
We
comments?
do not. We do not have any comments in the question box.
Okay. I would like to see if there is a motion to approve.
Brian Shamsky,
Thank you, Brian. And a second.
Jim Robertson,
Any discussion?
we don't have any hands raised or any questions in the comment box.
Okay. Thank you, Andrea. As we have done with the previous two, I would ask if there are any motions to disapprove the two motions to approve these minutes.
So please raise your hand if you object to approving these minutes.
Correct.
You have one hand raised.
Okay. Did the person that raised their hand wish to make a comment?
I don't think so.
Okay. With that one objection, based on the assumption that the rest of you approve of the motion to accept these minutes, the motion carries.
I just got a comment that she did not intend to object, so that was a stray hand raising, so
All right.
No objections.
Thank you, Andrea. We will proceed with consensus then that the motion carries to accept the summary minutes. Okay. With business out of the way, I'd like to open up the public comment period and welcome comments from guests to the meeting.
If you are a guest and you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand so we know that we can unmute you. We have Carl Masterson.
Welcome, Carl.
Well, hello, everybody. You mean to tell me that I am now officially an alternate to Linda?
I didn't hear any objections, Carl.
Why not?
I guess they like your bravado onto the board.
Okay, that's it. I'll be quiet now. Except I have to leave early for a doctor's appointment. So I'll be heading out about 2:30.
All right, thank you, Carl.
Yeah.
Other public comment. All right, that concludes. I was going to say that concludes the public comment period. And we will move on to item 1, I-Plan revision update. All right, I will be providing the I-Plan revision update. I will be covering stakeholder survey results, an update to map and data revisions for the I-Plan, as well as a timeline. For those guests that may not be familiar with the I-Plan, and I'm talking about the implementation plan to address the total maximum daily load for fecal bacteria in the Houston region, that I-Plan was approved back in January of 2013. So we were past the 5-year mark, which is traditionally a period where you want to start looking at how the I-Plan has functioned in terms of implementation results to see where there are measures that have stagnated or have not been implemented, to determine why, and to look forward in terms of how you'd want to progress with the implementation plan and hopefully improve implementation going forward. So we're currently revising the implementation plan at this moment. To help with the revision process, the BIG was asked to fill out a survey, and particularly this went to the coordination and policy, which is includes both BIG members as well as additional stakeholders. So it's a little bit larger than the 33-member BIG list. In addition to their alternates, it would be other stakeholders that have interest and have supported their attendance at the coordination and policy work group. So they were invited to participate in listening sessions, and we had 22 listening sessions. Essentially, it was a one-on-one meeting between myself and the stakeholder that was interested in the listening session. Also, surveys were sent out, and we'll cover those surveys in terms of the results today. I received 10 surveys at the time of drafting this presentation, so I'll cover those results. There's still time to submit surveys going forward for those who have interest in doing so. Some general thoughts on the surveys and the listening sessions. Most have been positive about the role of the BIG and the I-Plan with regards to bacteria reduction in the watershed. There was interest by the stakeholders in terms of increasing participation, both including members at meetings, work group meetings and the like, as well as reaching out to stakeholders to expand the brand, so to speak. Additionally, stakeholders expressed interest in expanding the role of research, finding ways to fund additional research as well, and to look to make data, where possible, more of a driven feature within our implementation effort. Stakeholders expressed a need for clarity with meetings and accountability for members. This reflects on the need for members' participation and feeling a part of the effort. They'd like to see the BIG as a brand be expanded out so that more are aware of what the BIG means, Bacteria Implementation Group, and what that means in terms of implementation and who is involved in implementation. Finally, as we are looking at prioritization, where we spend funding, where we'd like to see effort be spent in implementation, consider socioeconomic data as part of that process. Look for areas where impaired waters are found, and for those that are not familiar, the impairments are at an assessment level or assessment unit level, which is a small geographic area within a given watershed. And so look for ways in which socioeconomic data can be used to perhaps drive effort to improve the water quality in that assessment level. We'll talk more about AUs in just a moment, assessment units in a moment. So looking at the I-Plan survey, is really split in three different sections. One was focused on the implementation plan itself. 8 survey questions for this part of the survey. Overall, implementation of the I-Plan was considered positive, as I mentioned prior to this. Success was thought to be through tightened permit limits on wastewater treatment facilities, providing the BIG itself providing a regional assessment for bacteria as well as implementation efforts, and then outreach and awareness. The stakeholders, as part of the implementation effort, have spent a lot of time and funding on outreach and awareness to the issue of bacteria. The stakeholders expressed desire to see greater emphasis on research, as well as outreach specifically to decision makers out there. Finally, again, the expression of greater data to support decisions that are made, whether it's prioritizing our efforts, prioritizing the individual actions or activities that are carried out. Role of the BIG. So we focused 13 survey questions on the role of the BIG. In general, the members felt that the BIG was a proactive implementer in the region. They'd like to see more accountability by members. However, they saw a strength in the diversity of stakeholders. That diversity, though, provides some weakness for the BIG in terms of building consensus. It's a challenge to get 33 member organizations. And again, there's a larger subset of stakeholders out there past those 33 members in terms of maintaining attendance at meetings and work groups, as well as getting progress reports from those stakeholders. The meeting structure, they felt that the spring meeting is focused on best management practice, implementation, tech transfer, lessons learned, that kind of thing, an opportunity for a progress check. The fall meeting is really an annual report time, looking at data and progress of implementation. For improvement towards meetings, stakeholders expressed the need for updates to the BIG to come from work group members. Incorporating the gallery, those folks that attend the meetings who aren't members of the BIG, but incorporate their discussion and thoughts into the meetings itself. Express the desire to have subject matter experts come and present to the BIG, particularly at that spring meeting where we are looking at best management practice implementation. And finally, complete reviews for items such as the annual report, have those completed prior to the big meeting so that the focus is really on approval of that document and moving forward. Roles of HGAC and BIG members. There are 13 questions for this area. HGA's role, according to the BIG, is for coordination and facilitation of implementation and to provide accountability, to encourage member organizations to be accountable to the implementation plan and actions of the implementation plan, to look for opportunities to speak as well as engage in outside meetings, again, keep members accountable and assign tasks. And I took note of that, and we'll be working with the BIG to carry forward on that. Member roles. So responses were primarily from those that were a part of stormwater and wastewater. They felt comfortable with their current role, but would like to potentially explore how maybe a cooperative effort working together with others could potentially help improve or expand implementation. We'd like to explore how that would work. So we'll work on that in coordination and policy meetings. Additionally, funding, again, focus on research, where those opportunities lie. So as part of the revision process, we are going to be revising all maps and all data tables within the I-Plan. The overall endpoint is December of 2019 in terms of bringing all that data forward. We like to be able to provide comparisons between 2013, again, when the implementation plan was approved by the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to that of that endpoint, when and where possible. Not all data sets lend themselves to comparisons, but where we can, we'd like to be able to do that. Provide that assessment unit AU level assessment up to a segment level assessment. So that we're not just looking at the broad project area of the BIG, but also being able to zero in at a more granular focus. Because I know there's some certain organizations that maybe don't live at that higher level and would rather focus on their watershed and provide analysis at that watershed level so that they can take that information to their boards and to the other organizations that they represent. Again, include socioeconomic data where appropriate and opportunities are available to us. And then finally, just to let you know, we are working on that currently, and we plan on sharing that at the coordination and policy meeting that we'll be scheduling in July. And just a reminder, we will open this up for questions as we get towards the end of each segment. So when we get done with item 1, we will open it up for questions and comments. So finally, looking at the timeline, we will have technical work groups and coordination policy work group meet in July. We will bring the new data and maps to those groups and engage in a discussion of those sections germane to the work group. with a focus of trying to tease out any issues or concerns or direction for that revision for that implementation part. In August, we will take that information that we've gleaned and build out a straw man for the implementation plan revision and take that to the coordination and policy meeting. There was a request to bring it in sort of a staggered fashion. So we will look at bringing it out as technical reports from each of the different areas, whether it's wastewater treatment facility and sanitary sewer, or it's on-site sewage facility, or agriculture. We'll bring each of those sections out over time during the month of August so that folks don't feel overwhelmed. Additionally, when I did the one-on-one listening sessions, I encouraged members to say, hey, I'm interested in this section of the I-plan, because I'd have them focus on that. So I did get some comments of folks that would like to do that. So we'll proceed going forward with that. In September, there'd be a second draft provided to the coordination policy for second reading, and we'll follow up with technical work groups as needed in August and September for any concerns for a particular topic. This speedy timeline, October would be the third draft, third reading for the coordination policy. At that time, we would see if they felt it was ready to be presented to the BIG for potential for approval. If not, we will then present at the October 27th meeting where we are at and some of the example data and those kinds of things. So we are now at the end of the I-plan revision update. I wanted to give you a chance to ask questions. And again, wave your hand or provide a question in the question box.
Stephen, we have a question from Tom Douglas. In the SSO density map, the legend refers to SSO permits. Is that correct?
Yes, so the data that we used for that is related to, yes, it would have been those permits. So we don't have the sphere of everything, but those would be related to SSOs that are reported by those entities with permits to the TCEQ. Other questions?
I don't see any hands raised or any additional questions in the question box.
All right, if something comes to mind as we go forward, again, when we get to the roundtable, there'll be another opportunity to ask questions about this topic. All right, we'll be moving forward to the 2020 annual report update. I will start off this update, and then we will hear from Bill Hoffman and Lisa Montemayor. So first up, just to let you know, we're kind of the same place as we are with the I-plan revision. So we are looking at updating the data, whether it's a sanitary sewer overflow, SSO, or discharge monitoring reports that we get from wastewater treatment facilities, ambient data, and then local partner information that's given from our local partners on the things that they're doing to implement and things that they did in the calendar year 2019 to implement. I need to make that clear that the 2020 annual report is really a reflexive report looking back at things that happened in the January 1st to December 31st, 2019 period. So that's the type of information that we try to get from our partners, as well as the data that we look at is primarily for that period of time. We will incorporate anything that was learned during the listening sessions. As part of that survey process, I did ask for organizations to look at what they may have carried out in 2019 and to provide that in the spreadsheet that I gave them. So we'll look at that and incorporate that information into the report. As I mentioned, we're also preparing new maps. That'll be for the implementation plan as well as the annual report. And we're looking to gather success stories, as we typically put in our annual reports, 3 to 5 success stories from our partners, H-GAC included. We're looking for those success stories. If you have an idea of something that your organization has done that you thought was successful, or is in the process of doing that you think would be a highlight. Again, we use the annual report as a technical piece, but also an exhibitory piece, I'm sorry, to provide to our partners, to share with our stakeholders, to let them know of things that are working to reduce fecal bacteria. And so we'd like to highlight success stories that you might have. And so if you do have them, please reach out and share those with us. One of those success stories that we've come across is the City of Houston and their N4 program. So sanitary sewer overflows, we use those that reported data to see how we're doing with relationship to excursions, wastewater excursions, things that have gone away before from the collection system before it's made it to the wastewater treatment facility. So we look at that data to see how we're doing. If we are looking at expanded number of SSOs, then there's a concern there that we potentially need to address. And so certainly in the implementation plan, there's an area for sanitary sewer overflows and how we address that. One of that, again, is the reporting part of that process. And we've seen some challenges with the SSO data, and I've asked Bill Hoffman to expand on those challenges for you and kind of set up some of the benefits that the City of Houston is doing with their N4 program, sort of a response to providing reliable data that can easily be discerned. And so we're going to move over to Bill Hoffman at this moment.
Good afternoon. Well, as Stephen mentioned, and you all know, H-GAC has been working with SSO data for the past few years. I don't recall the first time we presented these data in a report. I think it was 2014, but I'm not certain. In the beginning, we were getting data from the field office and from the City of Houston. The field office provided us everything in Region 12. And originally only in the big, I believe, except those permittees, the City of Houston permittees. So two data sets had to be combined. The format was different. It was a little bit challenging and gave me quite a bit of extra gray hair. In the last couple of years, we've been getting data from the central office in Austin, TCEQ. And that data is in a more consistent format, although there have also, of course, there have been some necessity for changing our process in order to use data with different variable types, different field names, and so forth. So, and one thing which the TCEQ data has is a standardized cause code. Now, before we were using TCEQ data, and for the older data still, we had to standardize causes in order to be able to make quantitative and qualitative comparisons of what was driving the SSOs in our area. And that involved some text mining algorithms where we tried to ferret out the most important presumed cause of the SSO from a description of the SSO provided by the permittee. And that in itself was challenging. So, many wouldn't have any of the keywords that I could think of that might identify them. We also, because there could be several issues mentioned in this description, we had to create a hierarchy. So we did not double count a single event. We wanted to avoid doing anything like that because that would inflate the number of SSOs that there appeared to have occurred in a year, simply because the description might have been a bit more complete and more expansive. So moving forward, one other aspect of the data processing, which is closely related to not double counting, is to remove any duplicate records that might be there. I don't recall there being a lot of issues with that in the older data we used to get, but due to the structure of the TCEQ database, we're getting a lot more duplicate records in the data that we are being provided and that we import and analyze. This comes from the fact that there's a cause code, and it's apparently a drop-down list, and one can choose to enter all of the causes that were mentioned in a description, and each will be a separate record. So we, have had to find a way to eliminate that problem. So something that would help us a lot in eliminating duplicate records is a clear and unambiguous location, preferably something like the geographic coordinates, latitude and longitude. So just as an example, I received in February, I believe, the Region 12 raw data for 2018 and 2019. And I get the statewide data because there are a few other regions that we analyze, we need data for the big, because there are some permittees that kind of straddle the regional boundaries. So rather than ask TCEQ staff to do a number of separate queries, it's just as easy for us to separate it once we, at our end. So in the last data set we got, which covered both years 2018 and 2019, there were almost 13,000 records. Roughly 5,000 of those were for Region 12. For the math folks, that's about 39% of all the records, I would say, in the state come from Region 12. There's a permit field in there. I have permits in quotes because it's actually List O permits. That's its actual name, apparently. And it includes every permit that the permittee holds. So that could be a sludge disposal permit, the stormwater permits, a variety of things. So again, you want us to use some text mining tricks to pull out a single number to use for our analysis. And in this particular data set, the permit field for 177 records was blank. That's just for the Region 12, by the way. And in those cases, we just delete those from the analysis, as we would if there's no date of the event. We delete those. So hopefully we're not losing too much information that way. Anyway, after cleaning this up, going through the lengthy process of removing duplicates, standardizing causes, and so forth, out of this 4997 records, we had 3463 unique records. We believe they're unique because we didn't have a key bit of information we needed, which was the location. It's likely that actual events that were not duplicates were removed because they occurred in the area served by the same permittee on the same date, and there was minimal information to use to separate it from other things reported in that manner. Okay, now often something like an address appears in a field called the source. It's a partial address at best. It doesn't include a city name or a zip code, which is what our GIS crew tells me we need to geocode things automatically. So I tried to make a categorization of what we find in that source information, and there's a partial address. Not in every case is this an address. This basically means it begins with a number and has more than 2 words, including the number. 3664 of the 4900, then there are a number of other things. In some cases, it just identified the permittee, sometimes just the materials, like sewage, for instance, was a common one, but only in 6 cases. It might just have the name of the wastewater treatment facility, which could be where it occurred. It's not always clear. So this shows kind of the change that occurs as we go through processing. Now, this is going to be a little bit misleading because these 2 causes, this is the list of cause codes that are available for I believe it's the regional office staff to select as they enter the SSO data. We never created a category for analysis for corrosion by itself. That would end up as some sort of equipment failure, I believe, or for intentional discharge. That would probably get classified as an I&I event. But in any case, 300 records from the 2019 data, and I should mention there's a lot fewer reported SSOs in 2019 than in 2018. So 300 were removed. So that's roughly 15%, I believe. Well, actually about 20%. So anyway, so as I said, accurate location data would help me a lot in removing some of these duplicate events efficiently to avoid double counting. Or as I said, right now I'm removing duplicates a little more aggressively, and I'm probably erring in the other direction. One could say that's on the side of caution, but it has been applied to the total data set, not just the most recent data that we've received. So, and accurate location data has a number of benefits. I mean, we could easily map these specific locations of all of these SSOs, and although the individual permittees probably have a good idea where these things are occurring and what might be driving them, if they're going to be addressed, discussed, considered in a forum like the BIG, it helps to have a more global view. And being able to map them all on one large map would assist that, I believe. So it might also identify some areas where maybe infrastructure needs attention, perhaps. It would additionally allow us to more closely connect it with the water bodies into which the overflowed sewage might eventually flow. And often we might be able to see the impact in the ambient data, although common sense tells us there's going to be an impact. In some cases, there may not be. It depends on a number of factors, but one could at least make an attempt to do some more sophisticated statistical analysis of that. So, and as Stephen mentioned, the city of Houston has worked to develop a mobile app, which their staff are going to be using in the field so that they can enter not only the information about an SSO they're investigating, but capture the latitude and longitude of the event for their database. So with that, we'll transition to Lisa Montemayor.
And as we transition to Lisa, if there are questions for Bill, please provide those right now.
Do you want them asked right now, or do you want to hold on to them until after Lisa?
Well, I'd say let's go ahead and have questions for Bill if there are questions.
Okay, sure. We have one. Are the duplicate SSO entries actually duplicate entries, or are they repeating SSOs?
I'm not sure what if you mean by repeating SSOs, an SSO that lasts more than, that's an ongoing SSO. I've seen both. I've seen one, and I don't recall where it was from. Might not even have been in the big area. I don't believe it was, where it looked like it lasted several weeks, and a record was entered every business day. So there were 5 records for each week. And finally, there was an end date and an estimate of volume with the last record. So it can be both. Now in the database, the TCEQ's database, it would be not unusual to see duplicate records, but each record would have a different cause code. So by record, I mean a row in the database. So we see both types. And sometimes you can tell it's been entered by 2 different people because the language is different, the spelling is different, the description is slightly different, but it's the same date, and there may be something else to indicate it's the same location, at least just spot checking some of these things. Now, there are cases where we can't assign a standardized cause code similar to what we'd use, and in those cases, all that data is exported, and I review all that and assign a cause code manually, and that's where I've seen some of these cases where it looks like 2 different people have entered the event in the database. Any other questions?
Does that answer your question, Rachel? I think it does.
Yes, it does.
You can go ahead and make your comment.
This is awesome. This is really wonderful stuff. It's just like, oh, I'm nerding out on it. I love it. Thank you so much for all of your work on this bill. I really can't wait to see what else comes out of this effort. And I would love to try and help make the database, I'm doing air quotes there, that TCEQ keeps more rigorous. I'd love to help you do that if I can.
Yeah, well, let me clarify. I don't want to really criticize their database, because for the purposes it was probably designed for and what it's used for by TCEQ, which is to pull information prior to an inspection or for a desktop inspection, these problems I'm mentioning don't necessarily arise. So it's just, you know, it requires a little more tweaking for us to analyze the data that's in it. And just today I've had a thought about how to deal differently with these cause codes going forward. And anyway, that's just my one comment. So I didn't, if I appeared to be overly critical of the TCEQ database, it was not intentional. So thank you. Thank you, Rachel.
Other questions for Bill?
We don't have any more in the question box, and we don't have any hands raised, but I did want to say that Rachel added that this is way better than what they used to have. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. As I get ready to introduce Lisa Montemayor with the City of Houston, I did want to point out that H-GAC has received some interest from stakeholders on the idea or benefit from electronic submission, where common electronic forms could be used, required drop downs, sort of uniformity to the process could be done via phone or tablet entry to kind of eliminate some of these errors. And so think about that as Lisa Montemayor talks about the Infor program. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. And before I begin, I just want to make sure that you can see my screen and hear me okay.
We do. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. Okay, well, thanks for inviting me to speak about the Infor program. This stemmed from the conversation I was having with Stephen Johnston during the one-on-one interviews. And he mentioned the trouble that Bill Hoffman had to go through to compile the SSO data from the various permittees. So we were just kind of casually chatting about the way the City of Houston is tracking those, and he invited me to kind of share what we're doing with you all. So I'll get right to it. We have been capturing data through a number of different information systems. They were all operated pretty similarly. Basically, you know, someone would go in and enter the data into a database that produced tabular exportable data, which usually was in the form of an Excel file. We would use that to generate reports that we would send to TCEQ. But the Infor program does a lot more. I'm going to share a little bit of the benefits of it with you guys, so you can see, you know, why I think it would be it would behoove other permittees to use some kind of similar system. So just to give you a little background, the general flow for SSOs in the City of Houston is basically as follows. We receive a 311 service request, usually from a citizen calling in to report a plumbing issue or, you know, an observation of an overflow. Sometimes these requests are generated internally by our own employees. The 311 system interfaces with Infor so that when someone generates a service request, that service request automatically links into Infor and is assigned to an inspector based on their geographic location. So all of the inspectors are equipped with tablets out in the field, and Infor recognizes the location of this inspector and assigns the service request to him or her. Kind of similarly to a DoorDash or Uber system where, you know, the closest inspector picks up the case. And so the inspector responds, they go out there, do their thing, and from there, if it has to be referred over to another group for mitigation activities, then the inspector can do all of that through the tablet. They can generate work orders for repairs. It can be assigned to another group. They can capture photos, etc. So all of that takes place in the field. The details are entered, and after that, the reports that we're required to produce are generated automatically and sent out to an email distribution list. So just to give you an idea of what the forward-facing screen looks like for the inspector, this is it. This is what they would see on their tablet when they're out in the field. This might be a little difficult to see depending on the size of your screen, but basically it's got all of the SSO details in drop-down field boxes. So the inspector can just select, you know, the various details such as the cause, the type of structure that had the SSO, where the flow route was, whether it was contained or if it escaped into a drainage ditch or bayou, any kind of environmental impacts. They can also select the actions taken, so what was done to mitigate the SSO, if they cleared a service line or main line, if they cleaned and disinfected, if they notified the health department, etc. So there's a whole bunch of different options in here that we put in based on what we typically do out in the field. And you'll see there's other tabs here where a lot of other information can be entered. One of the neat things about Infor is that it'll capture resource usage as well. So when an employee accepts a service request and goes out and begins the work in the field, they click a certain button, and Infor recognizes this employee's ID number. They can click another button when they're done, and it captures, how much time was spent at this location. It knows what this employee's position is, and so that helps eventually with cost analysis. So we know, how much we're spending and how much energy and how much manpower we're using on these SSOs. Since that screen was kind of little, I thought I'd just show you here what some of the data is that it's captured by Infor. So this is the data that's required for us to report to TCEQ. And so all of that, of course, is captured, but this is some additional data that Infor can capture as well. Like I mentioned, the resource usage, it has a capability to actually take the photos and upload them to the service request file. So they're all in one place. No more having to email the photos to yourself or upload from a phone and try to attach them somehow or keep separate files. So this is really nice. Associated work orders, so if repairs are needed or additional inspections are needed, like a TV inspection or a special line cleaning, those can be generated through Infor, and it automatically goes to the correct group for assignment. It has a whole lot of other capabilities. I'm just talking specifically about SSOs today, but this system was built for both our drinking water operations and wastewater operations, and it can do a whole lot more than what I'm talking about today. One of the other cool features of it is that it's got this integrated mapping application. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the City of Houston's GIMS system. I know some folks from the Bayou Preservation Association use it pretty often to look at the storm lines that are feeding into our waterways. Well, the same information that's in the GIMS system was basically integrated into the Infor program. So now the inspectors, when they're out in the field, they can click on a little map icon and see where they're located on the map. And they can get all of the information, the manhole numbers, additional information about the lines, the infrastructure. And so all of that is here in one place. So they don't have to go to an external source like GIMS to look up the information. Back in the day, they used to have to print paper maps before they went out to the field, or have, you know, a booklet of all the maps to take with them, which wasn't always up to date. So this is really handy. I'm just going to show you real quickly some examples of the reports that are produced by Infor for us. This is basically the report that we submit to TCEQ on a weekly basis. We're required to submit these 5-day written reports following each SSO occurrence. And so it's basically just a table, simple table with all of the information that's required for us to submit. And this goes to them in a PDF file, but it could easily be exported to, basically Infor can produce it in any format. It can be produced as an Excel file if that's the preference. But it's very, very simple, very clean, and really easy to read, I think. This is another example of a tracking report that's produced. This one is produced in Excel, and this is the one that I shared with H-GAC to show them how Infor has the capability of exporting the data and giving us the coordinates as well. So this is produced automatically by the program. Our IT team set this up for the different parameters that we wanted on this report, and the coordinates are based on the street address of the service request, or the street address for the location of the SSO itself. So when a service request comes in, sometimes the actual location of the SSO is a little further away. And so the inspectors will edit the address to reflect the true location of the SSO. And then those coordinates are based on that real property address. So it kind of eliminates the errors from entering or misspelling a street address or putting in a wrong zip code or something like that, because the system will only allow you to use true H-GAC property addresses. And this is really kind of the meat and potatoes of what we wanted to do with the system. So the system, when it produces the Excel reports, we can then use those to create apps such as this one that allow us to do real analysis. So this might look kind of familiar. I know H-GAC uses ArcGIS Online to create a lot of their apps. But this basically allows us to plot all of the locations of the SSOs, and it's updated every month. We can filter the SSOs by the cause. So if we wanted to see only those SSOs caused by grease, we could filter for that. If we wanted to select a time frame, like just see the SSOs within the last 3 months, we could do that. And you can apply as many layers as you want. So if you wanted to see, if you wanted demographic information, or you wanted to know where all of the closest schools are located or anything like that, you could add, just like with any other GIS application. So this has been used a lot by our wastewater analysis group. They were recently looking at rehab projects that were completed, pipe bursting projects, and trying to see if there was a connection or a relationship between the SSOs that were occurring on service lateral lines that are connected to these city main lines that had recent pipe bursting activities. So that's kind of a cool way that it helps with analysis quickly. And this is one last thing I wanted to share, which is not necessarily related to SSOs, but I thought it was pretty cool because Infor allows us to also analyze how we're doing with respect to response times. So since all of the resource usage is captured, we can use that information in Infor with Power BI to generate these dashboards that allow us to see, how well we're doing in responding to SSOs. So the City of Houston has a goal of responding to every report of an SSO within 4 hours and no longer than 8 hours. And so we pulled this data and we're able to see, okay, how well are we doing? What percentage of the time are we meeting that 4-hour window? How often are we meeting the 8-hour window? We can filter by quadrants since our teams are based on 4 quadrants in the city. We can see if there's one team that lags a little behind the others and maybe reallocate resources to those teams. So I thought that was really cool. So like with any other software program that we've adopted, we've had some challenges. Of course, there's always resistance to change. The last system we had, I think we had for a few years. People were just getting used to it, and now all of a sudden they have to learn a new system. We've had, we still have people out in the field that aren't really tech savvy and don't like the tablets. So there's been some challenges in getting them to use them. We've had a few glitches here and there. Our IT team has had to work on. Some of the functions, we discovered after we started using it that we wanted things to be a little bit different, but unfortunately, after a system's built, there's very little that can change about it. And so you have to wait till, another phase before you can really make those big changes. But overall, this is a really highly developed system. It has a lot of capabilities and that we're just kind of scratching the surface on. So I think it's going to help things ultimately be a lot more efficient for the city, and hopefully it will allow us to produce the reports that in a format that will help TCEQ and H-GAC to be able to do more analysis. So with that, I will leave it open for questions.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Any questions for Lisa?
Sure, we have a handful of questions. I'll go ahead and start asking them. It's the fun part of this is you could ask questions along the way and then we can have them all ready to go at the end. So if anybody else has any more questions while I'm asking these, go ahead and type them into the comment box. So first, Lisa, what does Infor stand for?
Infor is actually the vendor name. So it's the company name is Infor. The system itself we refer to as IPS, which is Infor for public sector. But you could Google Infor and just look them up. It's just the vendor.
Sure. Now, how does Infor relate to 311 reports?
So 311 uses a system called Lagan. So when a person calls in, all of the information is stored in 311, the caller's information. This information is then transferred over to Infor automatically when the 311 operator selects the type of the type of issue. So basically, if it's a general wastewater issue and they make that selection, then the system is built to interface with 311 so that that information is transferred over to N4. It still remains in 311, but now we can use N4 for collecting all of the information. And while information is being entered in real time, it's still interfacing with 311. So those updates are happening in 311 as well. So that if a citizen calls back to 311, then they should be able to see the latest updates. The operator should be able to see the latest updates that were made in N4, and they can share those with the citizen.
And is this system publicly available like GIMS?
No, the system is not. This is just an internal system for the city.
Okay, does the information include problems on private property? For example, leaks in the service lateral lines?
Yes, we capture that as well. So that's actually probably more than half of the service requests we receive end up being private issues. N4 does capture all of those. And let me just go back here. Yeah, so you'll see on here, all of those light blue dots are actually private SSOs. And they can be breaks in the service lateral or an overflow from a private cleanout that was caused by an issue on the private side. So we do capture all of that information. On this spreadsheet as well, you can see here that when it's public or private, the inspector will select which type of system is responsible for the SSO, and so that's captured here. So we have a private one here, public here.
Okay, we have a couple more. Is this information shared with council members?
Yes, from time to time they do inquire. They want information about their specific district, and so this actually makes it a lot easier to pull that information and query that information to share with them.
Okay. Does N4 allow SSO data to be filtered by the eventual receiving stream, such as Buffalo Bayou? And could this improve identification of which streams are most impacted?
So there is a drop-down option for selecting the receiving water body. Currently, there aren't a whole lot of inspectors that are going to that length to select the actual receiving water body, unless we have evidence that it got into the water body itself, or we have a fish kill or something like that. Then we definitely would want to indicate that. What it does do, though, with the GPS information, or with the coordinates, we could easily map these and overlap a layer, the stream layer from Harris County, or the watershed layers, to see, what water bodies would have been impacted.
Okay, I have one comment and another question. The comment is they're really thrilled to see that the city's implementing this, so happy to see that. And the comment is, because we've run out of time for questions right now, do you have an email address that people could use for additional questions?
Yes, my email address is lisa.montemayor, it's MONTEMAYOR, at HoustonTX.gov.
Okay.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate your
Thank you.
presentation. And just to let folks know, this was really meant to be sort of a high-level review. We are going to be inviting the City of Houston back for one of our Clean Waters initiatives workshops. One of the things that we try to do is these technical workshops where we highlight needs and questions and go in greater depth. And so we're going to ask the city of Houston to come back and go into greater depth of what N4 does for them and how other cities might benefit from the use. So we look forward to keeping this conversation going. And Andrea, if you can give me my screen back. All right. And just to let you know, one of the things, as Lisa was mentioning, the SSO data and the ability to tie it to a water body, when I put that, the map up of these SSOs and density, the real challenge is those SSOs are based on the service area boundary of the permitted organization. So the wastewater treatment facility operator, the municipality or whatnot. And as you all are aware of, those service boundaries are not based on a watershed. And so we've had to make some effort to determine where an SSO went. In some cases, it was just splitting the number of SSOs in half and giving it to one watershed or to the other. And so having that information where we actually have the GIS coordinates would benefit the assessment going forward. And so that's one of the things we're looking to try to rectify. So let me walk back to where we were. So we are currently under the timeline for the annual report. This slide, it should look familiar to the one I presented with the I-plan revision in terms of July, going to the technical work groups to again get feedback on implementation that's been carried out during the 2019 calendar year, working with coordination and policy on maps and the like. In August, reviewing the first draft of the annual report text, beginning to pull out actual design elements for the group to look at, if need be, including the work groups and on further questions or discussion. In September, seeing the second read and a layout of the annual report, with a goal in October at the coordination and policy to see the final product with them signing off on sending it to the BIG for approval. That is our current timeline. Any questions related to the annual report process?
Yes, Stephen, we have a question. It is, we do not believe there's such a thing as a permit for an SSO. So
right, it's not, and I apologize for that misstatement. It's meant to be the permit that the wastewater treatment facility operator holds with the state and the requirement to report SSOs. So yes, that's a misstatement, and that map is wrong for that. Appreciate the comment. Other questions?
So there was a follow-up, is so the wording needs to be changed, and so
Yes, and that map, we're not publishing it, so, but yes, as we go forward, we'll make sure that gets clarified and corrected. Thank you. Other questions? All right, not hearing any. And again, if we need to come back to questions, we will do that at the very end. Let's move on to the next item 3, the TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load Program update. As we proceed to that update, I wanted to let the BIG know 2 TMDLs that we were talking about last year related to Brushy Creek and Spring Branch up in the San Jacinto watershed were approved by TCEQ. We will proceed with adding those to the I-plan revision in terms of incorporating them into the project area. So Mr. Jimmy Milliken from the Texas Institute of Applied Environmental Research at Tarleton State University is here on behalf of the TCEQ TMDL program to talk about work they are doing related to TMDLs and infill in the BIG project area. Jimmy, please take it away. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Tier's got a project with TCEQ this year where we're assisting TCEQ with developing 3 TMDLs in the big area. These TMDLs will be addendum projects where they'll be added into existing TMDLs that have already been approved in Grays Bayou, Lake Houston, and the Buffalo and White Oak Bayou watersheds. These new watersheds are going to be for the Harris County Flood Control Ditch D138. That will go into the Brace Bayou TMDL. And in Lake Houston's watershed, we're working on Walnut Creek. And then for Buffalo and White Oak Bayous, that will be Horsepin Creek. Again, TCEQ is the lead agency on this. Jason Leifester's the project manager, and then there's, of course, support funding from EPA. So the major topics I'll cover is I'll briefly go through the completed TMDLs that these new bacteria TMDLs will be added to, and then give an overview of each of these 3 new project watersheds, really focusing on features within the watershed as it pertains to TMDL development. So our first set of previously completed bacteria TMDLs I'll go over is in Brace Bayou above tidal. These were approved in 2010 and included bacteria TMDLs for 5 assessment units. Then an addendum was approved in 2013 that added 3 more watersheds. And this map shows the area of the 8 completed TMDLs and then our new project watershed kind of in the middle here, the Harris County Flood Control Ditch D138 that we're currently working on. And our next set of completed TMDLs is in Buffalo and White Oak Bayous. This was approved in 2009. It involved 18 segments with 23 assessment units within those segments receiving bacteria TMDLs. This is just a continuation. Then in 2013, an addendum was approved to add 1 more assessment unit. And then in 2015, Rolling Fork Creek was added to the TMDLs. Again, another map showing all the completed TMDLs in Buffalo and White Oak Bayou. There's 20 in all. And then shaded in green is our new project watershed, 1014C. That's Horsepin Creek. Then in the watersheds upstream of Lake Houston, these were approved in 2011. There's 15 assessment units in all that received bacteria TMDLs. Then Addendum 1 was approved in 2014 that added 6 more assessment units. And then here recently, as Stephen just mentioned, Brushy Creek and Spring Branch were approved within Addendum 2. And this map showing all 23 of the completed TMDLs and watersheds upstream of Lake Houston. Walnut Creek's over in the northwest or western area, segment or assessment unit 1008I01. So going through the individual new projects, the Harris County Flood Control Ditch D138, again, that's the one being added into the Brace Bayou above tidal and tributaries once we get it completed. The approach to creating the TMDL will be the flow duration curve and load duration curve approach, which has been used in many of these. Just to kind of show location of this ditch, it's just southwest of Bel Air. The segment itself consists of 1 assessment unit, so the entire segment's considered impaired. It is a direct tributary to Brace Bayou above tidal, which has already received a bacteria TMDL. This is a photograph of the actual sampling site. It's the only sampling site on the ditch. This is where all the samples were collected and from which the samples were collected and assessments were made in the integrated report. So the ditch D138 was first deemed as impaired for bacteria in 2016, and it's been deemed as impaired in all subsequent report years through the current 2020 draft. You'll notice geometric mean in the right column has exceeded the 126 criterion for all 3 of those years. Getting into features of the ditch, it's in a highly developed area. It's mostly residential. The entire area is completely covered under the Houston MS4, the 2010 urbanized area. So it's 100% covered by regulated stormwater. There's currently no wastewater treatment facilities within the watershed. We do typically add in a future growth component to the TMDL in case there is ever a wastewater treatment facility built within this watershed. That future growth component will allow for the allocations to be made for that. There's also no known OSSFs in this watershed based on the data we have. Land use, again, it's a very developed watershed. We typically use red to show developed. So this is 3 different shades of red. They all mean it's either anywhere from low to high intensity developed. Since we're using the low duration curve approach that relies heavily on a stream flow record, we don't have any actual stream flow data for the ditch, so we have to use a surrogate watershed to develop that record. I've selected one up in Brace Bayou, in the upper portion of Brace Bayou, to act as the stream flow record for this watershed. In order to get it refined down to something appropriate for such a small watershed, a drainage area ratio approach will be used to basically reduce the stream flow values down to something more reasonable. On our second project, this will be for Horsepen Creek, Assessment Unit 1014C01. This will be added into the Buffalo and White Oak Bayous TMDL. And again, the approach used to be flow duration curve and low duration curve approach. This is a picture of the sampling station location. It's the only one on this assessment unit. So this is where all the data was collected that led to the impairment status of this assessment unit. The assessment, or the segment itself, is broken into 3 separate assessment units. 03 and 02 are the upper assessment units. They're not deemed as impaired at this time. The lower assessment unit 01 is the one that we're concentrating on for this TMDL. That's the source of impairment there. That segment is, or assessment unit's been deemed as not supporting contact recreation use. So looking at the integrated report findings, again, this one was first listed in 2016, and in subsequent versions or report years for the integrated report, and you can see the geometric mean has exceeded the 126 criterion for all 3 report years. Within this watershed, there are quite a few wastewater treatment facilities. There's 14 in all. These will all be accounted for in the technical support document and in the TMDL. Waste load allocations will be applied to these. And they'll also be accounted for in the stream flow calculations. So areas under stormwater permit regulation, the area is a little over 3/4 covered within the 2010 urbanized area. So that's areas under the jurisdiction of MS4 regulations. This map just shows where that 2010 urbanized area overlays the watershed. You can see a little over 3/4 of the watershed's covered. Land use within the watershed, again, is very developed. It's mostly the red color for medium intensity and high intensity developed. There are some areas of pasture hay scattered throughout that the GIS layer picked up. And then we have a few barren areas scattered throughout. H-GAC provided us with data on OSSFs within the watershed, and you can see there are a few OSSFs. There's kind of concentrated down towards the actual impaired assessment unit. What we typically do and plan on doing on this technical support documents, the OSSFs are just mentioned as potential sources of impairment. There's not any load allocations or waste load allocations applied to the OSSF. They're just listed as one of the potential sources of impairment since they are present within the watershed. Again, since we're using the low duration curve method and there's not a gauge located on Horsepin Creek, we're using a surrogate USGS gauge location. We got kind of lucky on this one. There's a USGS gauge located in the adjacent watershed to Horsepin Creek, and it's of comparable size. We'll still use a drainage area ratio approach to modify the stream flow record to fit the watershed size of Horsepin, but it won't be quite as drastic change in the stream flow record due to the sizes being similar. And we'll also account for the wastewater treatment facilities when developing that stream flow record. So our third and final new TMDL will be for Walnut Creek, Assessment Unit 1008I01. This will be an addendum to the 15 TMDLs for watersheds upstream of Lake Houston. And again, it's the same approach to developing the TMDL using the low duration curve method. It's a picture of Walnut Creek. It's the only sampling station on Walnut Creek, so this is where the assessment data came from. The location within the watershed, you can see that it's in a more rural area than the other two. There's some communities that are at least partially within the watershed, Todd Mission, Magnolia, and Stagecoach. And this is actually, the segment itself is comprised of just the one assessment unit, so the entire segment's considered as impaired. Pretty much the same as the other two. This was first reported as impaired in 2016, and then in each subsequent version of the integrated report, you can see the geometric mean was exceeding the 126 criterion for each of those three report years. This watershed also has wastewater treatment facilities in it. There's 7 in all. 2 of them are labeled as pending on this map. The most western ones there, Woodhaven Interest and South Central Water Company. These are new facilities. It's assumed that they'll be online in the near future, so they're going to be included in the technical support document and in the TMDL waste load allocation calculations. For the regulated stormwater portion of the TMDL, we've estimated about 13.8% of the watersheds under some form of stormwater regulation. A little over half of that's due to the 2010 urbanized area covering about 3,500 acres of the watershed. Then there's another 3,200 acres that are covered under some sort of construction or general stormwater permits. This map really just shows that 2010 urbanized layer that makes up a little over half of that total stormwater, regulated stormwater area. And as I mentioned, there's other areas that are also being considered that have construction or general stormwater permit coverage. Land use in this watershed, as I mentioned, it's much more rural. In the upper half of the watershed, excuse me, it's mostly forest with some pasture and hay land cover. And then the lower portion has a combination of forest, pasture, hay, and then some low intensity developed areas. Again, H-GAC provided us with information on on-site sewage facility locations. You can see there's quite a few in this watershed, which of course is indicative of it being a little more rural, or quite a bit more rural than other two watersheds. You'll notice a blank area up in Grimes County where we don't really have anything except maybe one OSSF located up there. That's because we were having to get that information from the county of Grimes County, and we just recently received the information, so we'll be updating that map. So the TSD map for Walnut Creek will look a little bit different in that we should have it populated in Grimes County with whatever septic systems occur up there that we get. So the last map here for Walnut Creek shows the surrogate watershed use, Bear Branch. It's in fairly close proximity to Walnut Creek. Again, we'll make adjustments for wastewater treatment flows and use a drainage area ratio to refine that stream flow record to be something more appropriate for Walnut Creek. So the current status of this TMDL development, there'll be 3 technical support documents TIER will create, and they're to be completed by the end of August this year. Once they're completed and approved, the TSDs will be posted on TCEQ's website, and then TCEQ will notify BIG when they're ready for public review and comment. And then, of course, TCEQ will use these TSDs to develop addenda to be included in water quality management plan updates. So, questions?
So we have one question and one comment. We'll start with the question. Actually, Mr. Douglas has a little bit of a long question, so I'll just unmute him and let him ask it.
Oh, yeah, the question was that I have recently been reading computer simulation studies, and they have concluded that the source of fecal contamination, the species source, is a much better predictor of human pathogens than is the total quantity of bacteria, which is what we've been talking about here. And my question was, is there anything that we're doing currently or that we could do to build capacity to measure the level of human DNA in the water, because that would be a much better indicator of where the bacteria came from, and we wouldn't worry as much about raccoon bacteria and focus on human bacteria. And viruses, actually, in those simulation studies, viruses played a much bigger role than bacteria.
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure if there's many. In the past, there's been some bacteria source tracking studies done. I'm not sure what the status of those are now as far as determining how much is coming from wildlife as opposed to humans. For these projects, we're not doing any bacteria source tracking. So I guess an answer to your question is I'm really not sure what's going on out there, if anyone's really looking into that now or not.
Yeah, my question wasn't really at all bacteria source tracking as we know it. It's don't look for bacteria that are often associated with humans. Look for human poop. And if it came from humans, it will have human DNA in it. And I think we're looking at the future here. And I was just expressing interest. Is there something we can do to move toward the future? Because I think that's going to be, well, the simulations that have been done say that the species source is a better indicator than the total number of bacteria. And human DNA doesn't regrow in the bayou, so you don't have to worry about that.
And Tom, let me step in and just say I think that's something for us to maybe bring to the coordination policy in July. You know, we as we mentioned, or as I mentioned, there's interest in research focus, and I think that's a good topic for us to discuss with regards to research in the future.
Thanks.
Hey, another question. It might be for Stephen and Jimmy. It is, I hope that H-GAC will be able to incorporate the Grimes County OSSF data into its map.
Yeah, I'll speak for this. It's one of the issues we've had in the past. Both Grimes County and San Jacinto County are not in the H-GAC planning area, and we have reached out in the past to those counties to try to incorporate their information. We're also looking at another method for doing this, where you look at 911 addresses and determine based on service area boundaries if an address falls outside of a service area, but it does have a 911 address. We'll typically then assume that there's probably an OSSF. So we're looking at doing that in the short-term future. Other questions? I think we probably need to be pushing through.
Don't see any additional hands up or any more questions in the comment box.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and proceed then. All right, moving on to the next item, item 4, H-GAC water program updates. I will let Mr. Justin Bauer have the floor.
Thanks, Stephen. Give me just a moment. I will start the presentation here. There we go. I want to give you a real quick update on some watershed projects we're working on in the West Fork San Jacinto River system. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the West Fork San Jacinto River and Cypress Creek itself. These are both projects that we are working on as part of Clean Water Act 319 project funds with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. If you look at the map here, this is the entire watershed for the West Fork of the San Jacinto River between Lake Conroe and Lake Houston. We're specifically going to be talking about the system at the top and the bottom. My colleague Rachel Wyndham will be talking about Spring Creek, sandwiched right in between those. So looking at West Fork and Lake Creek watershed, Lake Creek is the northernmost tributary for the West Fork system. And so we looked at both those at the same time in the project we've worked on for a couple of years now. Most of the same issues that we have throughout the big area, elevated levels of fecal waste, and concern over nutrients, impacts of development, specifically in this watershed, some issues with sediment. Just to give you a quick update on the status of that project, that was a successful watershed protection plan. It was approved. It is currently in implementation. We've been focusing a lot of our initial efforts on education and outreach, obviously not quite so much the last couple of months, but we are still doing some planning for the future and working with several of our very active partners in the area. As with most of the region, it's hard to have a water quality conversation without a water quantity conversation. So we've been doing our very best to coordinate with many of the ongoing flood management efforts to look for ways those things can overlap and support each other. Meanwhile, we have a lot of fantastically active partners in the watershed. San Jacinto River Authority, Bioland Conservancy have been actively involved in some things. Corps and some other folks have been involved in the dredging process. There's been a lot of good conservation projects or priority focus going forward. So we're very excited to see a lot of good work already being done in the watershed, and we're looking to identify some future funding sources to continue to support that effort and doing our best to coordinate among our partners as we go. Going back to that regional context, we're going to skip down to the bottom of that system, the Cypress Creek watershed, probably the most densely developed other than the 45 corridor in West Fork. Slightly closer view here, primarily Harris County, little bits of Waller County out in the remnants of the Katy Prairie area. Most of the downstream area of this watershed is fairly densely developed, although it's outside, primarily outside of municipal areas. The issue here, again, same West Fork, we're seeing fairly appreciable reduction needs. You see ranging from about 65, 75% fecal waste loads in the watershed. Most of the load, unsurprisingly, is coming from the downstream areas and what we call the transitional areas. Number 2 there, we do still have some legacy activity, and obviously development is pushing into those headwaters. But for right now, most of our load is coming from downstream. Just looking quickly at the bacteria sources, this one's been a little different than a lot of our projects. In a lot of projects, we don't have a lot of just big smoking guns because we have such a density of households and we are seeing diminishing amounts of legacy agricultural activity. Dogs showed up as our number 1 with a bullet, but that doesn't mean that that is the only focus of our attention. Obviously, we're always interested and concerned about human waste sources because, as Stephen mentioned, and Tom mentioned, as you know, those are obviously have a higher potential to make us sick. We see this amount of bacteria growing between 2018 on the left and 2040 by about 1.5 times. So this is still a watershed in transition, still the amount of sources still going in. So this is a good time for us to get involved and start to curtail some of these sources. We've been working through this project for several years now. We have gotten through all the initial identifying the issues, informing the stakeholder partnership, and modeling and really getting a good idea. We're in the slightly messier work of trying to figure out what to do and who's going to do it and all the logistics. We hope to wrap that up fairly soon and get a watershed protection plan out. In the meantime, we're actively looking for opportunities in this and the other watershed I talked about to work with your organization, to do education and outreach, and help you potentially with partnership projects, even if that involves something of a flood management aspect. If there's a water quality aspect, we'd love to be involved. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have, or I'd be happy to elaborate on a call later with you at your leisure.
Hey, Andrea, do we have any questions?
We do not have any hands raised or any questions in the comment box.
All right, rather than go back to my slides, if we just want to go to Rachel's.
Sorry, everybody, had to unmute. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and pull up my presentation. So really happy about the speaking arrangement because Jimmy and Justin have led in really nicely to the kind of geographical area that I'll be focusing on. So I'm just gonna introduce everybody to a watershed protection plan project that we are starting in the Spring Creek area. And just to kind of give you an idea of the watershed, all this area highlighted in green represents the Spring Creek watershed. As we've seen in some of these other presentations, Spring Creek runs along the boundary, forms a big chunk of the boundary between Harris County and Montgomery County. And there are also several cities that overlap with the watershed area. The township of the Woodlands is probably the most highly developed area in the watershed. But as you can see, there are many other cities throughout. And just to give you an idea of the kind of land cover in the area, the major takeaway from this slide is to show you that the eastern side of the watershed is more highly developed. Obviously, we've got the Woodlands here and the I-45 corridor on the east side, but as you move west, it's more natural land cover types, so forest, grassland, wetland, and just a little bit of agriculture in the northwest corner of Harris County. And the reason that we're kicking off the project there is because in recent submissions of the integrated report from the TCEQ on surface water quality, it's been noted that Spring Creek and many of its tributaries are impaired for contact recreation. As we know, high bacteria concentrations indicate the presence of fecal waste, and that has been noted in Spring Creek and its tributaries, as well as concerns for aquatic life, including low dissolved oxygen levels and high levels of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. So to address these concerns, we're trying to develop a watershed protection plan. So my organization, the Houston-Galveston Area Council, is working with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality as facilitators for this project, but really I want to drive home that the most important work on this project is going to be put forward by the stakeholders in the watershed. So we're trying to develop a watershed protection plan with stakeholders that is non-regulatory and will kind of give us a roadmap going forward for how we're going to address these water quality concerns. And again, just really want to drive home that this will be a stakeholder-led effort. So just to kind of describe what the partnership will look like I said, the TCEQ and H-GAC are really acting more as facilitators for this project, and the majority of the work is going to be, or the most important work is going to be put forward by the stakeholders. And we will kind of compartmentalize this general group of stakeholders. So anyone who's interested in this project is welcome to participate. But from that stakeholder group, we're going to kind of break out into more focused work groups to look at specific water quality challenges, and then use the information that we come up with in those work groups to put forward to a steering committee. And again, the steering committee will be comprised of stakeholders in the group that will act in leadership roles to guide the decision-making process of the plan development. So just kind of give you an idea of the timeline for our project. Right now, obviously, we're in the early stages, just identifying what exactly the water quality issues are in this watershed, and moving forward with trying to get in touch with stakeholders in the watershed to form the partnership. So if you haven't heard from me already and you'd like to, I will flash my contact information in just a second here. So once we get our partnership together, that's when we can really get the ball rolling, discuss some of the water quality issues that we've identified, try and come up with solutions for those water quality impacts, and then formalize that in a watershed protection plan document to move forward with implementation. So we hope to get our watershed protection plan together by late 2021. And I guess the first step in that is getting the group together. So we are actually planning our public meeting, our first public meeting, for Wednesday, July 29th from 2 to 4 p.m. And it will be hosted virtually. So for registration details for this meeting, we invite you to join us. You can visit our website. That's at springcreekpartnership.com. And like I said, here's all my contact information. Probably email's the best way to get me, but please reach out with any questions or project concerns, or if you'd like to get involved.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Any questions for Rachel?
I don't see any raised hands or any questions in the comment box.
All right, I guess let's transfer over to Kathy, and I think you can just go back to my slide.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Kathy Jansen, and I am the Principal Program Coordinator with the Houston-Galveston Area Council, and I am so pleased to give you a brief update on the Water Innovation Strategies of Excellence Awards. What are the WISE Awards? Well, simply put, they are an awards program that seeks to recognize innovative strategies and projects in the region that can serve as a model for improving water quality. This is an awards program that's overseen by the Natural Resources Advisory Committee, which is an advisory committee to the H-GAC Board of Directors. But you guys at the BIG may more specifically know the WISE Awards as an idea that really germinated with you in the BIG through discussion. How do we find opportunities or ways to really promote some of the exemplary work that's taking place across the region with some entities that may not always get a lot of shine for their water quality work? Currently are eligible to local governments, businesses, industries, nonprofit, educational institutions, and of course, utility districts across the region in 4 counties, or excuse me, in 4 categories. That is planning and policy, education and public awareness, built projects that cost more than $500,000 to install, and built projects that cost less than $500,000 to install. 2020 marked the 2nd year of the Water Innovation Strategies of Excellence Awards, the WISE Awards. We had a little bit of a delayed start. We launched our awards program seeking applications in January, extended the application period into March, and then, as has happened to many of us on many different projects, COVID-19 hit and really threw us for a loop in terms of applications received, scoring, and multiple other factors. However, the judges have completed their scoring. I won't reveal to you who scored what at this point or what the rankings were, because we haven't yet presented those winners to the NRC, which we plan to do in August. I will note that year to year, 2019 to 2020, we did suffer from what I would characterize as a sophomore slump. This is about a 45% decrease in applicants from year to year, which is absolutely disheartening. At the same time, it tracks with things we've seen with other H-GAC awards programs, such as our Great Region Awards, the Parks and Natural Areas Awards, and all this in spite of or despite a broader outreach and engagement strategy for publicizing the awards. So how do we plan to move forward so that future cycles of this awards program get the shine and the number of applicants that we think would really be excited to participate in this? Well, for one, we're going to be working more closely with you, the members of the BIG, the members of the NRAC, and other communities who can act as ambassadors to the awards program to help publicize the opening of the awards, help promote submissions. All of you are also encouraged to submit on the award in the future. Our next awards period is likely to open up in January of 2021, and I hope you'll all consider submitting for the various projects that you're a part of. This time, is there any questions?
Don't see any questions in the chat box or any raised hands.
In that case, thank you, everyone.
Great, thank you, Kathy. And we will look forward to having the awardees in the future. Sure, there'll be a award ceremony, and additionally, we'll be highlighting the awardees in our annual report, as well as probably getting Kathy to come back in October to present in the spring or the fall meeting. So again, thank you, Kathy, for your presentation, as well as Justin and Rachel.
Stephen, we do have one comment. It was from Sarah Bernhardt, and she wanted to thank all of the presenters.
On behalf of the presenters, I want to thank Sarah for the comment, and we'll be sure to look forward to future updates from this group too. They're certainly well versed in this effort, and I thank them for their opportunities and work in this area. As we're pushing up at 3 o'clock, we'll keep the last part of this fairly simple. Other business, just want to mention one of the areas I'd like to expand out going forward is other business. It was mentioned at our one-on-ones and listening sessions in the survey that they'd like to see other business focus a lot more on implementation and maybe making this more of a partner roundtable. And maybe that was what it was originally. And I'd like to try to start putting a little more time here. And so we'll be working in each of the work groups to try to feel for how we might build out this other section here and get feedback on. As we're running a little bit out of time right now, unless you have something you'd like to add to this, I'm going to put up the slide for upcoming events and give you all a moment to maybe raise your hand if you've got something that you'd like to share to the rest of the BIG and our audience on something that you all are doing for implementation. And these are by no means all of the events that are coming. If you have any interest or desire for more information, reach out to me. You have Justin's contact as well as Rachel's contact for her meetings that are coming up. I did not get the July meeting in here. I'll certainly update that as well. But certainly reach out. I can give you more information on any of these meetings and how to get a hold of them. At this point, they are going to be webinar based. So it's certainly easy to share the link with you to get a hold of this. There is one partner meeting on here. That's the Harris County On-Site Wastewater Seminar. And I'll let Danielle mention anything's changed with regards to that date. Give her a chance to speak to that.
Hi, at this point, that date is still a go. We are exploring transitioning to a virtual series of webinars, and that will likely be pushed to August. But we're reaching out to our presenters now and confirming everyone's availability. So there'll be an announcement going out about that once that final decision is made in the next week or two.
Great, thank you, Danielle. Andrew, was there anything in terms of, did anybody want to share?
No one has shared anything in the question box, and there are no hands raised.
All right, if there are no additional comments or questions, I'll give you one more moment to do that. I'll put up the final slide here. Just want to note that the BIG is being supported by funding from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality through their Total Maximum Daily Load program. And I want to thank again and give a round of applause to all of our presenters today. Thank you for your time and effort in preparing for this meeting. Also let you know that I look forward to our future meetings. Hopefully they will also be moving back to in-person meetings, as I know some of you would like to see each other again, and hopefully that'll happen. Additionally, H-GAC is looking at resources for how we might have our meetings be a combination of the two, electronic as well as in person, and how best to do that in such a way that those who are on the website of things can feel a part of the meeting. So we're working on that process as well going forward. But I do want to thank you all for your patience with us as we move to these webinars. I know it's not, all the kinks aren't quite out yet, but we're certainly trying to make it as smooth as possible. With that, Andrea, is there any other comments before we close this out?
Just a couple of thank yous and great updates from some of the members.
All right, excellent. Again, thank you all. Look forward to meeting with you in the future. Again, look forward to my announcements for upcoming technical work groups, as well as the coordination of policy in July. I'll get those out this week. And with that, I will be closing
Stephen,
out.
we had a really important question.
Yes, go ahead.
Super important. Whose dog is that?
That dog, I do not know. This is one of our slides that we have for one of the regattas that were done about 10 years ago, I believe.
Oh, so that dog probably belongs to that guy.
I would assume so. Not my dog.
Okay.
My dog's the first one, the one on the first slide.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all again. Y'all have a great rest of the day.